Hello, everyone. We're glad to have you here for this. I guess we're celebrating you, James. Are we celebrating you? Celebrating James Goldberg. My name is Melisa Leilani Larson. I'm a former president of the Association for Mormon Letters, and we are excited at this year's conference to present James with the Smith-Pettit Award for Outstanding Contribution to Mormon Literature, an award. That I've actually been a recipient of in the past, which is exciting. So it's a very exclusive club. I would give you a jacket, James, if there was a jacket to have. James, this award celebrates writers who have, I suppose we're supposed to say it's a mid-career award, which I don't know what that means exactly. If we've hit this point, James, you're exactly halfway in the middle. You're only allowed to write for, this much more time.
You know,
Um,
Brian Kershiznik at the BYU Art Museum did a mid-career retrospective of his recently,
mm.
and he's older than I am by
And
a little bit. And so I think it's optimistic, right? Like
It's
at
optimistic. It's
mid-career
like you've
just
got so
means
much more to do.
you're gonna
Yeah,
keep trucking.
we're
Yep.
just going to keep going. Neither of us is dead, so we're just going to keep writing. But this is an award that celebrates someone, a mid-career writer who's made a significant contribution to the field of Mormon literature. And I do believe that James qualifies for this in spades, and that he is, as long as I've known him, he's been a writer and writing constantly. When I met him, he was a playwright. He has since become a poet and a novelist, publishing several books of poetry, lots of short fiction, and three novels, which is really exciting. And two plays, at least, one of which won the Association for Mormon Letters Drama Award in, I think, 2008. Exactly yesterday. Not so long ago at all, right? Right? 2008. So that's, yeah, whoa, goodness. Yeah, James has been in the field for a long time, and we're very glad to have him here. And I like to heckle him a lot. We do that back and forth, though. It's done. We've been really good friends for a long time. We were actually just talking about how we first met, which was James was one of the organizers of the New Play Project. And I had just moved back to Utah after finishing my MFA in the fall of 2007, and I wanted to get involved in the theater scene in Utah again. And I saw about in the very fledgling pages of Facebook, heard about a new play project, and James and I set up a meeting at the HVAC at BYU, the HVAC that no longer exists.
That's the
And
Fine Arts
we
Center.
had this really, yes, the Fine Arts Center. And we had this nice, awkward meeting where we were both standing on either side of the slab, wondering, is that the person I'm supposed to meet with? And I thought, he can't be a student. He's got too much of a beard. And it turns out he was neither a student. He was not a student, but he did have a beard. Anyways,
Yeah.
complicated.
Yeah, I'd recently graduated from BYU. We still met on campus sometimes because other participants were there. And yeah,
Yeah, we had a lot of student participants in New Play Project. But that was the beginning. The rest is history, or something
yeah.
poetical like that. But yeah, I've been good friends with James, and have been very pleased to see his work, to see his prolific writing just continue. His catalog just expands continually. He also has a Patreon. He's very active there. And it's his work is really important, and he has a very distinct voice, which I'm really glad we have in this space. So I think what we're going to do today is I'm going to ask James some questions, kind of about his career and about his intentions and what he's working on, etc. And we'll just have, I don't know, we'll just have some fun poking at him a bit
Yeah,
and
I'm
plucking at his
excited
beard.
to talk to you, give some background on my past, but also about Mormon literature, right?
Hmm.
I mean, it's been, yeah, almost 20 years. I've been doing Mormon literature for 20 years, and almost that long since the day. It feels almost like there could be a joke out of, a Scandinavian Filipina and a Sikh Jewish Mormon
Yeah, what was
writer
the word? You used to
walk
have a
into a
blog
slab.
that was
Caucajumexian, that's right.
yes, that's right.
Yes, a Scandinavian Filipino Mormon writer and a Caucajumexian Mormon writer walk into a slab at the Harris Fine Arts Center. And like back then, there is a Mormon literary tradition,
Hmm.
that I think we were just barely kind of getting to know, but mostly we were thinking in terms of like potential and possibility.
Right.
What could we do in this field? And yeah, it's been a minute, and now we've got. I kind of tried to gather up some of my stuff,
Oh, that's
and
great.
I'm
Look at that. Yes. Oh, and I didn't mention the
still like,
Liplets. I should have mentioned the Liplets. But
oh, that's true. We'll
James is
probably
one
get
of
there.
the founders of the Mormon Liplets, which is, I think, got a deadline for the next round coming up,
Yep.
where submissions are 1,000 words or less.
Yeah.
Great stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, let's dive into it and
Let's
talk
dive in. But
Mormon
actually,
lit
you
and
you've
me.
started us off with that first question, like the that you've been writing Mormon literature for 20 years, and we should talk a little bit about where Mormon literature is today, because we talked about it then. We would have these conversations at like late at night because we didn't require quite as much sleep as we do now, talking about like our grand aspirations for us ourselves as writers, but also for the field and the potential, like what Mormon the we've talked a lot about quirky Mormon stories and characters, and but where do you think literature is now versus where it was then?
That's an interesting question. So, I mean, one thing that has changed between then and now is just this question of the word Mormon,
Hmm.
um, that that we've come to use in different ways. I'm glad we still use it for the literature.
I agree.
Um, so I think, in the church, there was this emphasis on let's use Latter-day Saint and let's use the full name of the church, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, to show the sort of claims to the connection to the core truth claims of the Restoration movement.
Hmm.
Um, and I support that, right? I think, there's good theological and kind of cultural reasons to not like Mormon Church as a nickname, but to say no, this Latter-day Saint movement. This is our self-understanding. But literature is not that, right? uh, I think you should use Latter-day Saint when you're talking about the aspects of faith that are very grounded in revelation and kind of the overtly spiritual history.
Hmm.
um, Mormon remains a really useful word to talk about the stuff that might not be the restored gospel of Jesus Christ, right?
Right.
It's
That's
just
more of the
sort of,
cultural.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, it's the culture, and sometimes we kind of blame culture for things and we just use it as the excuse when things don't work. But I think the reality is people have to live in culture,
Hmm.
and
And there
they,
are positive aspects to that, definitely.
right, that we live in imagination, we live in possibility, and Mormon literature is a place where we can explore that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And so I think the I think we're at a time where there is a growing recognition that people need the space outside of the official Latter-day Saint, where they figure out how do they negotiate identity, how do they figure themselves out, how do they relate to that. And
Hmm.
literature can be really good at that.
Right.
So in terms of like, I guess more than where the field is, I'm answering what the field is.
Sure.
But but Mormon literature is a space where you can explore, yeah, what it can mean to be Mormon, and what in what ways this intellectual inheritance and historical inheritance can say something about the world we live in now more broadly.
Sure.
Um, the Association for Mormon Letters
Hmm.
defines Mormon literature really broadly. They
Hmm.
say it's anything by, for, or about Latter-day Saints, people in, broader Latter-day Saint movement, but almost all that's Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, right? Statistically,
Right.
we're like 98% of the larger movement. So, but yeah, it's anything connected to that in those three ways. And I think the past 20 years in all three, we've seen really impressive things. So in
Hmm.
terms of what's written by Latter-day Saints, um, tons of stuff.
Yeah.
Huge successes. I'm really excited about, say, Brandon Sanderson and the ways that I think Latter-day Saint thought and imagery shows up in his work in different
Mhm.
ways. Uh, in terms of things about Latter-day Saints, um, I think there's some exciting stuff too. A lot of the time, there's like an exoticism, an exploitive way that Latter-day Saints are treated. We're this
Definitely.
like close
Mhm.
enough to kind of mainstream American in American media that we're, and it's usually American media where we show up. So we're close enough to be familiar, but then different enough to be spooky, scary.
Yeah.
And so certainly like in TV, we're seeing a lot of that.
Right.
But like I really liked the film Heretic that came out recently,
Hmm.
that
Yep.
I thought treated Latter-day Saints as human beings and asked kind of religious questions
Interesting
about,
questions. Yeah.
in some ways, I thought that film was a dialogue between what the Hugh Grant character says about religion and
Hmm.
what the sisters show about religion and religious relationality. So that's
Totally.
not by a Latter-day Saint, but it depicted us. It depicted us in a way that I thought was sympathetic and human, and it asked the kinds of questions that I'm interested in.
Totally.
So I think there's good signs there. Um, and then in terms of stuff that's for Latter-day Saints, we've seen a growing sort of market. There was a while when there weren't a lot of places to publish something that was
Totally. Yep.
targeted toward a Latter-day Saint. I think now I've been particularly excited by Wayfair magazine
Hmm.
taking off, and I feel like it's got a fairly broad Latter-day Saint audience that's interested. They read my essays more than they read my stories or poems, but I got a really good response to my last piece of fiction there.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I think that's important for the culture. And then, of course, there are a handful of us who are right at the center of the target where we're by, for, and about. Um, and I'm just glad we're creating work and carrying on a conversation. And
Hmm.
I do think the past 20 years have been a time, there's still a lot of problems where there's not some institutional support and audience support in that. It's a tough time for publishing industry generally, but
Hmm.
I'm proud of people who have just kind of done it anyway.
Totally. Yep. I
So
would agree.
that, yeah, if we want to look back and say, what were people thinking about in the early 21st century?
Hmm.
We can get answers about what did they think about stuff within the church? What did they think about from the perspective of a Mormon heritage? How did the world look?
Sure.
Um, we've got more stuff being written in languages other than English and
Which
available
is
in
really exciting.
translation.
Yeah. Because, the membership of the church is larger outside of the continental US than
Yeah,
within. So that's more reflective of where we are
yeah.
as a
And it
membership.
took a minute for the cultural, I should say, we are still playing catch up
Oh, yeah. We'll be
in
playing catch up
having
for a while.
cultural
But
institutions catch up to the demographics.
right. Right.
Um, but I think we are taking concrete steps now in a
Hmm.
way that we really is very rare to have somebody, bold, um, step out and do something the way, Kent Larson once did a like Portuguese language contest.
Hmm.
So there were some early steps, but I think we're doing a lot more now.
I was thinking it'd be a good idea for us to go through some common questions about Mormon literature that come up a lot, because James, I think, is a great authority to answer some of those questions. So these aren't necessarily from me personally, but there are a lot of questions that come up that James and I get
Yeah,
asked a lot.
this
You
is
know,
maybe time for us to be grumpy together,
we can
right?
be grumpy together. It's actually why we did so well. Our chats late at night went so long because we have a tendency to rant together. There was a lot of root beer consumed at um, unsightly times of night while we complained about how hard it was to be a writer, and it still is.
Yeah.
I'm gonna bring some cream soda over, and Nicole will just roll her eyes at both of us. But So I have a couple of these questions that I'm gonna uh, propose to James with this idea
Okay, I
that
don't
they
have root
are
beer, but cheers.
water. It's good for you, right? But some of these common questions about Mormon literature, and I'm going to throw them at James and see, you know, see if we can poke the bear a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, but one of these really common questions that people ask about, about Mormon literature, we've been talking about, where the field, how you would define it, and where the field has been, and where it is now. Um, and a common question is, shouldn't we try to write things that are universal? I mean, why even write Mormon literature in the first place? I mean, wouldn't you be better off as a writer? Would you be more successful if you're writing regular literature instead?
Yes. So I hate this question.
Yeah,
And I hate this question
regular
because,
literature.
yeah, buried in it is this idea that, like, somewhere there's this category of like real literature, normal literature, and that's a neutral category.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't think that's true, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That you're going to be negotiating with different kinds of literature in different markets all the time,
Yeah.
and you should be allowed to talk about the terms of engagement and kind of choose whether
Mm-hmm.
you want to engage it or not. So the strongest statement of this kind of argument that I've heard um, was actually when Michael Hicks got the Lifetime Achievement Award. Lance Larson was interviewing him and said, okay, I sometimes in classes paraphrase Rita Dove, who's an African American writer. And she's somebody who says, I want to be a writer first, and then I'm a Black writer, right? But
Mm-hmm.
the writer comes first. And for her, absolutely, I think that's legitimate to say you want to be a writer first and then take identity into account. And Lance said he feels the same way about being a Mormon writer. He's a writer, and then Mormon is this label that might complicate that or add to a conversation or something, but let him just be a writer. And I can be sympathetic with the part of that that is sort of longing to escape people's preconceived notions
Mm-hmm.
about what your responsibility is coming from a community or representing that community. And those expectations can come from both directions, right? You can be
Sure.
exoticized by a mainstream audience, and you can have people in your community who feel like you need to represent one exact way to
Mm-hmm.
do things, which takes away the very thing we were talking about, right? If they want you to be the model Latter-day Saint that checks all the boxes, why do literature, right? The whole point of literature is to experiment and play. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm sympathetic to the idea that people sometimes want to just be a writer and
Mm-hmm.
want room to play. That said, for me, I'd actually go the other way. I'd say I'm a Latter-day Saint first. I'm interested in Mormon conversations first.
Mm-hmm.
And writing is a tool that I use to get into that conversations and an approach I bring because I think Mormonism needs it. And I
Mm-hmm.
think somebody in a lived experience in a church community, like some people are fine without it, and that's great. But some people could really use a space where they're engaging their imaginations and they're playing with possibilities.
Yeah.
So I have zero problem saying I'm Mormon first and a writer second. Um, and in between those two ends, there's like a whole spectrum of possibilities, right? You, I
Right.
think, are somebody who's done really well at engaging with questions of like, where is theater, where is society, but being very unafraid of bringing Mormon stories into that,
Mm-hmm.
um, and making it a part of the conversation. I think either way, though, I want it to feel like these two parts of the equation, the Mormon side and the writer side, or the
Mm-hmm.
literary side, are options, not obligation. And sometimes
Sure.
people make it more an obligation. So I worry that when somebody like Lance tells their students, you need to be a writer first, and then let Mormon inform that in some way, what we're
Mm-hmm.
actually telling students is you kind of need to submit to a larger system of power, which
Right.
happens to be run by people who come from a different culture with different assumptions about the world, and you need
Mhm.
to figure out what they want you to say, right?
Right.
Um, and I
Well, do
think,
you,
yeah,
no, go ahead. Well, I was
well,
just gonna say, do you,
it's a terrible waste of being a writer.
uh-huh.
If what you're doing is saying, I'm going to embrace imagination so I can
Hmm.
contort myself into the shape something else has said. That
Right.
I've gone out to create an imaginescape,
Hmm.
but I'm only going to do it after I've colonized my own mind, right? And
Right.
let
Yeah.
somebody else's idea of what belongs enforce that and set the aesthetic terms. And then I can write, and then I can sneak in a little bit. But maybe I'm showing off my Mormon upbringing for for the sort of sensationalism of it. That's
Hmm.
just so dumb, right?
Yeah.
It's um
Yeah.
that's what's upsetting to me. And I do come from a different background on this because I don't know. My grandparents got married at a time when interracial marriage was still illegal in the US and
Yeah.
had to figure out how that happened. My grandma, her family was from the Mormon colonies in northern Mexico, but she spent part of her growing up years in central Mexico, some in Texas, kind of back and forth. When she was teaching in Arizona, school teachers, like you weren't allowed to speak Spanish in school, even though there's
Hmm.
plenty of Spanish speakers. Like Arizona is right there.
That's bizarre.
People who
Yeah.
used to be, well, it's not bizarre. It's this is what power and culture does,
Yeah. No,
right?
you're right. You're right.
Whoever's in charge says this is what we're going to do. English is
Uh-huh.
correct and proper and respectable. Spanish is backward and
Right.
it's wrong. And
Right.
so, there's whole stories everywhere of people getting their knuckles rapped or whatever when they speak a wrong language. So even though she was a fluent Spanish speaker and had
Hmm.
grown up around the Spanish language her whole life, she wasn't
Hmm.
allowed to speak it. And she used to tell this story about a kid who kind of struggled to focus in class and was
Hmm.
always somewhere else. And there's one day where she's like, I just really need him to pay attention. And she walked up behind him and said, Volteate, turn around, right? And
Yeah.
said his eyes just got big
Uh-huh.
because she'd spoken to him in his language. And that felt different. He understood English, right?
Hmm.
But the home language, the language that was most comfortable, it hits different. And they
Right.
had a different bond in that language than
Sure.
they ever did. So she could have gotten fired for
Uh-huh.
doing this, but there was a power in it. And
Hmm.
to me, the exciting thing about Mormon literature is that power
Hmm.
of telling stories that are already supercharged for their target audience, right? Uh,
Right.
Mormon readers bring so many associations and experiences to my work that, like,
Hmm.
yeah, I'm not making New York Times bestseller list with this stuff, but who
Uh-huh.
says that matters more? I
Uh-huh.
feel like I have a right and an opportunity to write more deep and meaningful literature by giving myself permission to speak
Hmm.
my language and talk about where I come from. And I get pretty upset when
No.
people are
No.
dismissive of that or
Yeah.
assume that something with a bigger marketing budget is automatically more worthy of my time and attention as an
Right.
artist.
As an artist, yeah. Well, that actually leads really well, I think, into the next of these questions in the list. Because that question of like, you're writing for a target audience, you want to write with power. I mean, this next question is, can Latter-day Saints write things that are real and authentic? Which is something that I think sometimes we, don't allow ourselves that grace, um, because we have a reputation for being just too gosh darn optimistic and naive. And I think that is like as a people culturally, but also like the way that we appear in general, both American and globally, like how Mormons are portrayed, but also how Mormons, I think, want to be portrayed to a certain extent. That there's this that we want to put on this image of happiness and we are seeking after perfection in all things. So there's a certain level of making those appearances as, we want to be as shiny and happy as possible, and we want to hide away the things that are more difficult. But literature and art and theater are all about kind of like exploring who we are through those things that are more difficult. And sometimes that's uncomfortable for people. Sometimes the job of an artist is to make people uncomfortable. But yeah, that's I think the question is, can Latter-day Saints write things that are real and authentic?
Yeah. We get this question a lot too.
Yes, we do.
And
Yes, we do.
sometimes it comes up in mainstream media. Um, there was a New York Times piece not that long after you and I met, I think. I think it was early 2010s,
Mm-hmm.
where the headline was something like Mormons offer cautionary tale in sunny outlook versus literary greatness, right? The
Right,
idea
right.
that like
That
our
that phrasing,
community,
yeah. Sunny outlook um versus what I'm sorry, was the second
literary
part?
greatness, I
Literary
think was
greatness.
the,
Yeah.
yep.
Yep.
And so I don't know. I think that that's just cheap thinking though from the
Mm-hmm.
outside to take us up and say, oh, here's a cautionary tale, here's a lesson for you about these
Mm-hmm.
people. And it's pretty rich from people who are sometimes maybe closing the door
Yeah.
Latter-day Saint literature in the more literary side, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
doors were open to us in the places where we told different kind of stories that weren't open other places. It's also lazy because we have a long tradition of telling really complicated stories,
Right.
um,
Right.
but we don't always get acknowledged for that. And then I think within the community, yeah, we have this sense. Um, I work for church history. You and I were there for a while together.
Mm-hmm.
And I've given presentations before. It's been a minute, but when I started there many years ago, I gave several presentations about how the church spent the late 20th century, well, most of the 20th century, in kind of a broadcast media era. So in the
Mm-hmm.
early days, culture and stories were mostly passed on orally. We had, of course, a lot of print media too. But the way you learned about Joseph Smith in the early days was, I mean, you met him, people talked about him. And
Yeah.
it's really to the end of the 1800s, there's still wards where in testimony, meaning people were getting up and telling Nauvoo stories, right?
Right.
And then in the 20th century, there's changes in technology and the church is growing in a way where broadcast media becomes the big thing.
Yeah. The radio.
Yep, radio, then TV, and in that era, the way people message is have like one, here's an idealized image that we like send out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think everybody did that. We might have done it double in terms of
Yeah.
how idealized our image was because we have, at really aspirational ideas for ourselves about what we want to do as a community, how we should live individually. We wanted to be more accepted in the larger society and have people see us as respectable. And
Mm-hmm.
so we had some other motivation to say, no, no, really, we're all the good things, right?
Right.
There were all these pressures on that story. And then that story that was coming out, usually through church channels, right? It kind of reinforces itself. And then I was saying, now in this century, we're in this digital media era where there's tons of different stories and a diversity of different stories. And people are more used to complicated stories because you don't just have the short ad time, right? People
Mm-hmm.
are experiencing sort of a kaleidoscope of things, and there's room for that. So um, theologically, I think we've always been called to tell these complex stories. Doctrine and Covenants 132 that tells us some of what exaltation is says it's to inherit all heights and depths.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's like important to what we believe
Yeah.
that we learn to tell about the scope of things. And then yeah, it is in addition to being important, it's like practical. Like people are hungry for those kinds of stories. But I think it's taken us some time to have more people getting the confidence to
Mm-hmm.
not care what the broader society thinks and also not care what your most guarded ward member might think.
Yeah.
and and find the way to tell that complicated story in the middle. That said, I would say, like, really anything in this pile, that's a
Yeah.
lot of what I'm doing, and I'm not the only one doing this, right? There's tons of
Right.
people doing this,
Hmm.
and even what's published um, by the church and in Deseret Book, I think the average has shifted significantly. There's at least a lot more room for
Hmm.
stories that are complicated. I was working on a history project where we told very short stories from different countries around the world. And that was
Hmm.
kind of an opportunity also to tell stories about different aspects of human experience.
Yeah.
And in the profile on Cote d'Ivoire in West Africa, we told a story about a guy who serves a mission and sees his companion get stabbed in front of him. And it's kind of a PTSD story, right?
Uh-huh.
Um, we follow him afterwards. What did it take? What, which things felt weird because of this,
Hmm.
right? What were the
Right.
triggers? How did he think through how this, like, why did God let this happen? And what does it mean for me? But I think we're in an era where we're more interested, even in the Latter-day Saint literature side, let alone
Hmm.
the Mormon literature part, in engaging with that stuff. So we can do it.
Hmm.
Uh, we were spiritually called to do it, and we do it. Uh, Readers who ask that question need to read more,
Right.
I
Right.
think, is the main answer,
And that's
right?
the main answer. That there's a lot of things, there are a lot of things in the field. Like if you hold up that stack again, hold your stack up again, James. Like if you look at all of the things that James has written and created, and there's so many things also that he has on the web. And if you go to Wayfair, is it wayfair.org, and read some of James's essays and fiction and poetry that have been published in that journal. Like I actually think the interesting thing about authenticity is that good writing allows people to meet folks that they are unfamiliar with, as well as people that they are shocked sometimes to know. Like, I know this person, I know these characters. And I think that's one of the joys of Mormon literature, of good Mormon literature, is to be like, there's a familiarity there. Because what you were saying earlier, like there are so many things, assumptions that we make, but things that we know because this is who we are and what we believe. Um, but also I think that the second part of that question is like, are Mormons too optimistic and naive to be authentic? And I think when we allow our characters and our stories to be authentic, there is an optimism that comes out of that naturally, that comes, it's based in our faith, that the
Yep.
optimism is actually fueled by our authenticity, that if we are open to sharing those stories that are more complicated, we have the knowledge that is founded in our faith to be optimistic about where our lives are going and where things are headed and the progress that we're making eternally.
And I think we're in a social, cultural, and political moment in broader society in
Hmm.
many parts of the world now
Yeah.
where that optimism is really called for too.
Yeah.
And it
And
needs
sometimes
to
it's
be a
hard. Sometimes
grounded
it's harder.
optimism, right?
Yeah.
That it's not a flimsy cheerfulness, but it's if you think about the Alma in the Book of Mormon at the Waters of Mormon, they
Hmm.
they come in and they say we're going to mourn with those that mourn and comfort those that stand in need of comfort. And I think those
Hmm.
are different, right? I'm
Right.
interested in literature that can mourn with those that mourn and kind
Hmm.
of weigh what are we up against.
Right.
But I don't just want my writing to do that and leave somebody. It's good for somebody to feel seen and recognized in their struggles, the struggles of the world, but I think it's worth it to give but somebody something to hold on to, right? I
Hmm.
think that,
Yeah.
yeah, the
Yeah.
gospel optimism, when you can ground it right, when you can
Right.
channel it right, is a valuable thing. And maybe
Yep.
historically we haven't taken it seriously enough, right? We've
I agree with that.
associated
Hmm.
serious literature with the sort of discouraging, depressing with deconstruction of
Hmm.
things, and we maybe haven't paid enough attention to literature that's kind of forging new stories for us and helping
Hmm.
us rebuild, hold on to something again.
Right.
But I think we need that in our community. I think we need that in the world.
I totally agree, and especially at the time that we're living in. But also, I think there is something to be said for that optimism is it's hard. It's harder. It's harder to write things that are um that are more not uplifting necessarily, but that are more positive, and yet
Yeah.
you want to be positive, but you want to balance that so that it's not, smarmy. Like there, it's difficult. It's a very difficult thing.
Yes.
And sometimes it's easy to just be dark and dreary and heavy and serious and think, look at me, I'm being such a good writer. I'm being so literary. When really I think sometimes that's actually easier and sometimes a little more lazy to just be like, oh, everything is wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah,
yes. Yeah. I feel that obligation that you need to be able to look into the darkness long enough, right? It's that I
right.
think that, okay, here's the thing to play with. The writer's fundamental obligation is don't look away. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we look at the dark and we look away and we pull the quick cheerfulness, right?
Yeah, right.
But sometimes, right, we look in the dark and then we look away before we get to the questions of how things continue. Let me read two poems
That'd be great.
that I
Do it.
think show, and these, I do have works that do both in one thing. This one might be what we're going to do, one dark and one light,
Okay.
um, but they go together. So this one is the opening poem to a book of Lamentations, which is
Well, see,
like,
that's appropriate
that's my
for dark.
2020 book, right? We were going through a lot. And what I really felt like for this one is we need a spiritual vocabulary for that intensity.
Hmm.
And the
Hmm.
Bible has it, right? That's
Right.
why I got Lamentations on there.
Right.
But let's use the whole piano, right? Not just a few pretty notes on the high end. So the opening poem to this book is called The Book of Mormon Was Written for Our Day.
Mm.
A voice from the dust for a nuclear age, for a world leaning into its climate's change, for men gone mad with homicidal rage, which cannot be quenched with children's blood. For us, a lonely prophet carved Coriantumr's fate into plates of tarnished gold. This is the truth he buried beneath us, that we are so very capable of choosing death and choosing it and choosing it and choosing it until we grow numb, until even beaten, broken, breathless, our bodies will strain toward the consuming violence of a total self destruction. Right? Like that's,
Yeah.
we're just looking at it, but we're looking at it in our language. And I think if you've had experiences with the Book of Mormon, there's an extra power to the poem because it's
Hmm.
drawing on what you already have, right?
Right.
But then take this other poem. This is called Resilience. This is
Hmm.
from Phoenix Song, which is maybe a good book for this.
Resilience.
So this is
Yeah.
my, there's a lot going on in this book, but it's mostly my cancer poetry book is the way I think
Mm.
of it. That I spent a year in progressively intensive chemotherapy and went through a lot. And so it's about what it's like to feel kind of burned down and then rebuild.
Hmm.
And after all those poems, we've got this one called Resilience. Eating the fruit from Lehi's dream, the very marrow in my bones fills up with light. You can imagine all the maladies a little love in the bones can shield you from. And I think that's something, right? And this, I mean, I was thinking about marrow and bones because
Hmm.
the part of my bone marrow that produces white blood cells was wiped out twice. I had
Yeah. Oh
two
gosh.
stem cell transplants by the time
Hmm.
I got back, right? So like,
Yeah.
yes, there are all these maladies, but it's just this little bit of light. Like how transformative is that?
Hmm.
And so, yeah, I like a literature that encompasses all heights and depths and gives us the
Hmm.
power of both
Right.
because we've vicariously been through it.
Right. No, I appreciate the contrast of those two poems because it's like the Book of Mormon poem has such a starkness that like and even if you because you were talking about it from the perspective of being familiar with the Book of Mormon, but even if you're not, if you haven't read the Book of Mormon, the truth of it, especially today in the age we are in politically and historically, specifically in this country, like to think about the that hits home really hard, even if you don't have the Book of Mormon reference.
Yes.
And then if you add the Book of Mormon layer, it's just kind of like but yeah, what you were saying earlier about, not looking away and not flinching, and it's the writer's job to not flinch. Because sometimes, the reader can put the book down and walk away. The writer doesn't have that luxury because
Yep.
someday that reader is going to pick that book up again. And I think the contrast is so interesting that the one is longer and darker and more, a little bit more, this is a technical term, but just a little bit more, ugh, like there is a weight to it, you know? Um,
Yep.
Meanwhile, Resilience is it's a shorter piece. It's about light, but it is also light and optimistic in a way
Yeah.
that the first poem is much darker and a little more grim. And so
Yeah.
they do have a very interesting it's a great pairing because the
Yeah.
juxtaposition just kind of, lifts them both up a little more. So thanks for sharing those.
Yeah. And
Um
everybody feels it. I think writing craft is, yeah, can you taste the language? Can you
mhm,
feel how to make the language that intensive, obsessive dark and that light, right? And
right.
that's not just, yeah, there's a lot of ingredients that go into that, but we need people to do that. One
Hmm.
of the things I get as feedback on pieces fairly frequently is thank you for putting this into words
Yeah.
because it's not a fundamentally different thing than something else. Somebody else has intuited this,
Hmm.
but to get it all the way articulated, to have somebody who can keep staring and get you there, help somebody else feel their way the rest of the way into that.
Yeah.
But it's a huge, and that's why I say, right, like I'm good being Mormon first.
Hmm.
Writing is a tool in my Mormonism that
Right.
helps me continue this spiritual objective and finish it through.
Hmm.
And it becomes a tool of ministering then, but
Yeah.
in both the mourning and the comforting, right?
Right.
Because we need the dark and light.
Well, you need to be aware of them both. Like, I mean, faith is faith because there is doubt. They're two sides of the same coin. Like, we don't know what light is if you don't have darkness. Like, those things
Yes.
are, it's a
Yeah, like this is
fundamental thing.
Lehi, right?
It's like
Opposition
how it
in
goes
all
together.
things and that.
Opposition in all things, that's something that, that writers need to be very aware of. I mean, that idea of optimism, I mean, sometimes I think the difficulty with optimism as an idea is that if it's just alone, it's shallow. There's got to be layers to it. And there has to be reasoning that, we're pointing towards something more positive. Anyway, are you going to read something else?
Yeah, well, yes.
I
Finish your
saw the book.
thought.
I saw the book move. So,
Finish your thought.
I don't know. That's all. That's the thought is the
Okay.
thought. Yeah.
Then no, yeah. How do they like braid together? So we have
Hmm.
these dualities and they become somehow one, right?
Hmm.
I think
Hmm. You need a little bit of both. Yeah.
yeah, heights contain depths, right? And depths are aware of heights, and
You can't have the one without the other. It's not
yeah,
possible.
the resilience doesn't exist without the maladies.
Hmm.
Um, I was thinking as we're talking about dark and light, so Song of Names
Hmm.
is a collaborative book I did with Artist Partial. There's a couple
Yes.
other, Scott Hales has a guest poem in there, Mary Jane Rice has one, but mostly Artist and I took different stories from church history of people she was particularly interested in, or a few I was particularly interested in. And we wrote these like historical introductions, poems, and then like devotional meditations on each.
Hmm.
Um, but one of the stories that I brought to the conversation was one. There's a city called Manaus that's like way up the Amazon in Brazil. So it's in the rainforest where the Negro and the Solimões rivers come together.
Hmm.
And one of them is like sandy. And so the water's actually light.
Okay.
And the other one is kind of deep and the water's dark. And there's
Mm.
a moment where they come together where you can see the two colors in the river, like through Manaus, before they're mixing and becoming integrated, right?
Right.
Um, and there's this wonderful story about members from Manaus deciding the first time, how are we going to put together a caravan to go together to the temple in Sao Paulo? So we're going to go
Mm.
way upriver and through the Amazon rainforest and whatever. But I've got a poem about that caravan that plays with this dark and light.
Hmm.
The path to God has at least one beginning, where dark and sandy waters meet, where light meets dark and grace meets sinning. The path to God has at least one beginning. Sail up to the heavens where stars are spinning. Take a taste of eternity, savor the sweet. The
Mm,
path to God has at least one beginning where dark and sandy waters meet. I think that's part of what's drawn me to the history of the church. I'm
mhm,
more interested in church history, like, I don't know, almost aesthetically,
mhm.
as here are examples of people who are playing with through their lives these these human challenges and dilemmas with how different aspects of experience mix. Um, and so I'm not looking at like how do we evaluate this or that historical figure and how
Mhm.
do they stand up to scrutiny? I don't care, right? What I care about is like what did they go through and how can we connect to them
Mhm.
on this level that is both emotional and evocative,
Right.
that transcends, it contains their experience and transcends their experience.
Mhm.
Um, and how can our past unlock the human within us
Right.
and open up different doors to what it means to be a soul, a spirit in a
Mhm.
body on earth?
Mhm. Well, I think what you just said about history is exactly what we look for in literature, is this idea of you want to associate with the character the way that you're looking for the character in the historical figure, because that's what we as humans, we are storytelling is innately in us because we are connecting to each other as humans. And we look for that in story and we look for that in history. And I think that's what you're saying about like finding that soul and connecting to that soul. I mean, there is a really wonderful truth that comes with it being a real person, historical person who has lived and existed. But I do feel like that's that's strikingly similar to what we look for in a good character in a story.
I would say, as a community, we've invested a lot in history, and I think
Hmm.
that's good.
Yeah.
But sometimes that's meant we are out of balance between our investment in one set of approaches to history, which is
Hmm.
primarily like the academic historians approach, where we're mostly saying, how do we determine what's true? How can we like evaluate sources,
Yeah.
kind of assess what happened? And then the sort of sociologists, right? The how do we assess that? How do we recognize structures of power and analyze that? And yeah, sometimes there's some like moralizing around that. Maybe that set of approaches to history has influenced us more than is useful. And
Mm.
a necessary complement to that is the literary approach to history,
Hmm.
right? Coming with that thing you described that is fundamentally about finding human connection and understanding human experience. I
Hmm.
don't think that is the key ingredient in the training for academic study of history.
Right.
I hope that's the key ingredient of like a journeyman writer's experience, right? As you're
Right.
coming of age as a writer,
If it's
and
not about anything else, if it's not about character, what is it about?
what is it about?
Hmm.
And so I feel like our community as a whole would be better served if we found out ways to give people the writer's experience. If
Hmm.
we found out ways to sharpen that sensibility, we
Mm.
would have a healthier experience with our past and we would have more material to deal with the diverse and changing challenges of the present.
Yep. Yeah, that's great.
So we don't just need universal stuff. We need particular stuff because we live in particularity. And sure, there's a risk we could be too optimistic and naive. That's because we didn't train writers. We didn't give people the room to become authentic, to spend the time to not look away. And as we
Hmm.
do those things, it doesn't just get us a handful of good books, it fosters a sensibility that is going to help our community
Hmm. Yep.
continue to be a community through a time where the forces of atomization are strong.
Right.
I think we need the writers. I
Yep.
just do. And yeah, I'm a writer. Of course, I'm going to say that. But I'm a writer because I think we need that, not
Right.
because I wanted to be a writer and I happen to also be a Latter-day Saint.
Well,
Okay.
I think it can seem like a very lonely thing sometimes as a writer to be like, am I the only one that's noticing this? Am I the only one that cares about this? It
No.
feels very like we need to have, it can feel really unsupported at times.
Yeah. No, we for sure don't have the infrastructure.
Hmm.
Maybe what's sustained me through some of that is if I meet people who clearly need the thing,
Hmm.
then I can go, the problem is the lack of systems to support me, but
Yeah.
it's not that I'm doing a spiritual work nobody has use for,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
I'm the underfunded doctor, right? And the you know,
Yeah.
I know, I've got relatives who practice medicine in India where
Yeah.
like you got to work different because you don't have a lot of resources, but there
Hmm.
were things they could do to heal people. And yeah, as a writer at that center target, right,
Right.
where you're doing by, for, and about, there's not a ton of resources, but there's
Yeah.
need, and yeah, I have felt myself drawn again and again to that, even when
Right.
I'm
Nope,
yep.
I agree. I'm there. I find that really relatable. Um, well, the third question on this list of questions that we get a lot about literature, and this is the one that I personally find really frustrating. When are we going to have a Shakespeare of our own, James?
What's so frustrating about that?
Well, I feel like the fact that we've been talking for a while about the fact that we're writers and that this is what we do, and I think the question asking, and of course it goes back to we have a little bit of a folk story connected, I think, to President Kimball, but it goes back further, doesn't it, to
So Orson F. Whitney
Orson of
said
Whitney.
this in the late 19th century. Someday we'll have Miltons and Shakespeare's of our own. Nobody reads Milton anymore, so they
No,
remember Shakespeare, even though Milton's great.
Milton is
Um,
great.
but they remember the Shakespeare part, and then Kimball in the 70s kind of repeated that
Hmm.
um, and brought it
Well,
back. Yeah.
I think the thing that's frustrating to me about this question is like, when are we going to have a Shakespeare of our own? I that's an affront to someone who works really hard and has been working in the arts for a long time. And it's basically saying, because Shakespeare is Shakespeare, and yes, okay, on the one level, Shakespeare is eternal because Shakespeare somehow got in a little bit of a time capsule, and 500 years later, and part of it is that he's a fantastic writer. He's an excellent dramatist, and he was very prolific. So we have like almost 30 plays, potentially more than 30 plays that he wrote. And we still know them and study them now. But I think the reason that he was so prolific was that he was a working writer, he was a working artist, he was a working actor at a time like that was his job. He went and did it every day, and the audience came and they laughed at those fairies and they cried when, those silly teenagers um, were, doing all sorts of silly things and killing themselves and falling in love overnight, all of these silly things. And there's great tragedy and also really fantastic comedy. There's a wealth of stories in his stuff, and we still study it now. But the thing is, my point is that he was a working writer. He was I like that you said a little bit ago, that used the word journeyman. Um, he was able to perfect his craft and he was able to work on it. It wasn't a hobby, it's what he was doing, it's how he made his living. And there are a lot of us doing that now.
Yep.
And the world is a lot bigger than it was 500
Yep.
years ago. And there are a lot more people to try to get into the globe, but
Yep.
there are also a lot more distractions
Yep.
that prevent
Yeah.
people
No,
from
I
being
think
there.
Eric
So,
Samuelson wrote a piece once called, I think it was called Mormon Drama, Whither Mormon Drama, or Whither. He played with the two, whither like where are you going, or whither
yeah,
like
whether,
does it
yeah,
dry up. But basically, in that, he says, you want a Mormon Shakespeare, build a Mormon globe, right? If you have
right.
the Globe Theater, if you have the people coming and we need the groundlings, and we need
Hmm.
the people where this is a fancy thing for them, right? All layers of audience like that, the audience helps, right?
Right.
Um, and then Therick Jepson, who's the Iriantum editor, has said part of it is, are we willing to, we read Shakespeare with this intensity,
Hmm.
right? And we're willing to invest. So not just do we have a place for somebody to go develop and practice and have occasion
Hmm.
to write, do we have readership that's willing to like think so hard about literature that it's worth having this depth and that kind of stuff. So
Right.
that's part of how you build it up. The other thing I would say about this question that comes up all the freaking time, and
All the
some
freaking
people
time.
who say, well, oh, we just can't. But
What
yeah,
is,
to
there
your
is no
point, like
Mormon
there are
literature.
more Latter-day Saints now than there were people in Britain in Shakespeare's time. More
Right,
active Latter-day Saints, right?
right.
Or at least about as many. I'm not
Uh-huh.
up on my demographics to be precise, but I know it's roughly like that. Um, when people ask that question, there's two things they may be talking about. One is a Shakespeare quality depth of experience. Are there
Mhm.
people like really using language? Are there people hitting those like emotional depths that you get sometimes in Shakespeare? And my
Mhm.
answer to that is like, yeah, we got them. Check.
Yeah.
You can have a Shakespeare level aesthetic experience with at least passages of the work that already exists.
Mhm.
And like if you've had a great literary experience that like lifts you out of yourself and breaks your heart, that's what Nicole always says when you have a new play.
Oh,
She's like, there's a new Mel play. Am I ready for my heart to be shattered again?
yeah. And I'm
Right?
like, here's my new hammer. I'm ready to do it.
Here's the
Yeah.
new hammer. Like, what more can you ask for than that? Relatively rating, like this is a
Yeah.
9.5 or a 9.7 on the shatter scale. Like, sure, but also who cares, right?
hmm
I think part of what people are asking for is when are we going to have somebody that famous, right?
I think that's actually what the question is asking. I think that's what
Yep.
it means. And that's also upsetting.
And people are assuming that we're going to have that because somebody with a calling, right?
hmm
Somebody who was a church leader said it
Yeah.
aspirationally, and they want to shortcut it as prophecy without the labor, right?
W-
Of a
Yeah.
communion. And there's a couple things I think about that. One
hmm
is Shakespeare is Shakespeare. I love Shakespeare as a writer.
Right.
He has the global stature he does partly because he was the biggest writer at the time the English beat the Spanish Armada. And
hmm
the English proceeded to build a bunch of boats and go out around the world. And there's plenty of people in the world who learned that Shakespeare was a genius behind the guys who carried bayonets,
Yeah.
right? And
And
if
there were a lot
that,
of families at that time that the only two books they owned in the house were a Bible
a
and the works of
Bible and
Shakespeare.
Shakespeare, right? And that's
hmm
because the nation took him up as a project,
Yep.
and that project, and then the nation took over a lot of the world, right?
Yeah.
And that kind of greatness I don't want. I wash my hands of it, right? Like I hope a Mormon writer never has the kind of stature that comes from global conquest,
Right.
because no, right? And people have made the most of it, and I
hmm
think it's great if you're from India and you love Shakespeare and find something there that's beautiful, and there are lots of people like that.
hmm
But like that's not what we want,
Right.
right? So what we should aspire to is if we focus on the quality and we
hmm
invest in the quality and let that be its own reward, teach
Yeah.
ourselves to have that depth of experience, that's good. If we're looking for external affirmation through
hmm
literature, that's a trap.
Yeah.
Because the
Well, it's
kind
also
of
not possible.
literature that gets external affirmation is going to be the kind that's on external terms.
Right. Well, it's also not possible to get that to reach that level of fame as Shakespeare. It it came to
And
him
nobody's,
after he was dead. It's all posthumous. Like
yep,
he what well, I brought up him being a working artist at the time because that's how the famous that he was in his
yep.
lifetime. Like it's not
And
possible for anyone to become Shakespeare
no,
until like 300 or 400 years later.
that's
And
true.
who knows?
And that said, like we have had in the commercial book world, the
hmm
Stephanie Meyers and Brandon Sandersons have
Shannon
been
Hale,
able to, Shannon Hale,
Brandon
have been
Molia.
able to create experiences for people where
hmm
across national borders and in a globalized economy, like people have found something in each of those works that resonates with them. And we can be proud of that. But
Yeah.
I think what happens is we end up putting an asterisk on it because
hmm
we're like, oh, just normal readers chose them.
Yes.
But we, and that's the New York Times article we were talking about earlier. That's like,
hmm
yes, Mormons can be successful. They can resonate with people in these different genres, but they can't do literary excellence. They're not going to get the awards that we at the New York Times, right? This set of people is giving. And I think
Hmm.
that's just a totally separate question, right?
Right.
How do people in our community relate to different structures of power? And I think
Hmm.
as readers and as patrons and as a community, we need to separate the two and
Hmm.
say, let's tell the stories, and by all means let's build readership and stuff, but we can't judge ourselves by a standard of this thing that happened for different historical reasons,
Hmm.
some of which we don't want.
Right.
You know,
No,
I say
exactly.
this too when people ask about, oh, there's all this great Jewish literature. I'm like, I don't want a Holocaust, right? Because I'm
No.
sure we would produce a lot of stuff digging deep if a similar thing happened to our community. And
Hmm.
that
No.
that's a price nobody wants to pay, right?
No. Hmm.
Um, good.
Yeah. Well, I think you also, what you just mentioned takes us a segue into the last question in this section, which is this idea of audience. I mean, is there an audience for Mormon literature? Which is can be frustrating in the same way that the question about Shakespeare is frustrating. Is like, do people actually want to read your stuff? Ask myself this all the time when I sit down to write a play that has an LDS angle. It's like, is anyone going to come to see this show? And you actually have to take that a few steps back and be like, is anyone going to produce this play? Which is a very legit question. Plays are meant to be performed. So it's like, is there an audience? Which I think is integral to that question of, yeah, are we going to have Shakespeare's of our own? Because the Shakespeare was a populist, is very popular in his time. Audiences came to him. So it's like, yeah, is there an audience? Do people want this work?
Yeah, I'd answer that in two ways. One is we're in pretty early stages of building the infrastructure to have a market
Mm-hmm.
where people, because a market is how do you convert people's emotional experience into a resource pool
Mm-hmm.
that helps support the creation of additional work, right? Um, it is kind of cool that we have like Deseret Book, like they're doing more devotional work, but
Mm-hmm.
like not every religion has its own
No, it's
bookstore,
true.
right?
It's very true. Yeah.
Um, and so I think that's cool. I think it's cool that we have had people who have been successful in the broader market. But in terms of like the literary, right, the stuff that we can say kind of does different work about representing the culture and asking deep questions and that kind of high culture stuff that people mean when they put literature with a capital L, right?
Right.
Um, there, there's not a huge market for that period anywhere. This is not a time where that's been maybe as valued as it was at some different times. But in Mormon literature, we're early in building that market.
Mm-hmm.
That is different from is there an audience in the sense of can you have a deep aesthetic, emotional, and spiritual connection with, like, can a reader have that experience with work? And you know as well as I do, right? Like 20 years ago, when I was doing New Play Project, you were doing New Play Project, and people were coming to plays. Little Happy Secrets in 2008, man,
Yeah.
those were talkbacks, right? That
Hmm.
people came and saw this play by Mel about somebody who realized she's falling in love with her roommate at BYU and post mission. And it's just a very human story where the monologues are prayers and that kind of stuff. And I remember people there coming from lots of different angles, whether they felt like, man, this is my story and I'm seeing it on stage in front of other people, or people who
Hmm.
were like, I have never thought about this way. I've
Right.
thought about it from other angles.
Yeah.
That was a really meaningful thing. Absolutely, people have been moved by my work when I was doing prep for this interview. Literally, while I'm doing prep, I got a text from somebody saying, "Hey, my son finished Tales of the Kelm First Ward."
Yeah.
It's this sort of gently satirical comedy. Kelm is like in Eastern European Jewish folklore, a village of village idiots, and the premise is
Hmm.
there's a ward there now. There's Latter-day Saints, and they're
Yeah.
all idiots. And so they're doing things that you may recognize because in your ward, we're somewhere on that spectrum.
Somewhere.
Um, but yeah, so his son, who I think is in his teens still, finished the book, loved the book, and was like, you got to ask him for a sequel, right?
Mm,
It's a
hmm.
beautiful thing to get that kind of thing. I got another,
Yeah, you always want folks to want more. That's the good
yeah,
sign. Yeah.
yeah, because it shows they're having an experience with this that is inflecting the other parts of their life in some way.
Hmm.
That it wasn't just, oh, that was a fun experience, good, next,
Yeah.
but that they want to continue to engage with something in this space.
Right.
Um, I just got a request recently by somebody in my email. She said, "Hey, it's my friend's birthday coming up. Is one of the zero birthdays, right? I think she's turning 40.
Oh, that's such a big
And
birthday.
she was like, could I get a signed book by you?" And it was funny
Oh.
because she's writing like I'm a big deal, and I'm like, I'm just a dude, like I'm in my basement right now. Yes, I can. Thank you for telling me
Yeah.
that you care.
Yeah.
But one thing that stood out to that request, about that request to me, was that she said, really, your writing is kind of how we became friends. That we were
Oh.
at church together and we
Hmm.
both liked this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And we'd go on walks and we'd talk about it. And
Yeah.
like, you don't know us, but you've been important to bringing out some of those
Hmm.
things that otherwise, like, people don't just, you might want a heart-to-heart conversation. It's like tough to break the ice and get there, right?
Right, right, right.
Kafka called literature an axe for the frozen sea inside of
Mm,
us.
yeah,
And
that's
so I
great.
think if we can get like the religious part of you, those waters run deep. And if you can
Hmm.
get an axe through the waters of like habit and just the force of repetition that happens in a religious culture and help you talk about it new again, super meaningful.
Yeah.
Um, had a guy in Trader Joe's stop me recently to thank me for an essay called on salting and sealing, or sealing and
Mhm.
salting. I don't even remember the title of my own essay, but it's an essay about when
There are a
people
lot of
leave the
them.
church and how do we make sense of that,
Yeah.
and how can we feel like they were salted by their experience. Maybe this is part of the work we do, is can I
Hmm.
give you something to take with you in whatever other life experience. But he came up to me, and it was interesting because he's like, hey, are you James Goldberg? And I'm like, dude, we're in Orem. If you think it's me, it's probably me. um, but but yes, I'm James Goldberg.
That's
And
like
he
our very
said,
first meeting, me going, is it the dude with the beard? Yes, it's the dude
yeah,
with the beard. Yeah.
but he's somebody who's not involved in the church anymore, but
Hmm.
somehow still found this essay and
Hmm.
found it like really healing
Yeah.
to have a voice from, being religiously active in the community, who's still reaching out and meeting him where he is,
Yeah.
right? And
Hmm.
thinking through the complex. And that's one where actually editors got back to me and were like, we don't feel like you've taken seriously the how tough this can be in a relationship. I'm like, okay, I gotta like go back to that, take an axe to that part of my heart, right?
Right.
So
Right.
that I can come talk about that. Beautiful. Okay, I'm going to tell one more story about readers,
Okay.
which is uh, I got sent a photo once from that's a woman in a hospital bed, and she's holding "Let Me Drown with Moses." This
Mm.
book.
Mm. Hmm.
And I got this photo because it was the last book she read. She passed away shortly after that, and kind of young. I think it was like
Hmm.
complications after childbirth or something,
Oh
and just
gosh.
heartbreaking.
So hard. Yeah.
Um, but the friend who sent me the photo said, "I just want you to know, right, that like at this last part of her life where she like didn't know what's going to happen,
Hmm.
this was with her, right? She could
Right.
have that comfort." And that's that heights and depths discussion we were having again, right?
Yeah.
Are we capable of having those conversations? Yes, because we're humans, we go through things.
Hmm.
And we need to do that work of not looking away, because there are going to be people who can't, they don't have the option.
Uh-huh.
And so, yes, there's an audience, because as long as there are people going through mortality,
Hmm.
and sometimes right on that edge of
Hmm.
mortality, there are going to be people who need to find connection,
Yeah.
and this boiled down and concentrated language, right? The emotional, spiritual, and intellectual labor of looking at something really long and giving it this compact shape, like that's going to be a service to them. So the potential audience, right? The audience connection is real and it's
Mhm.
happening. What we need to do is build that out to a market that can sustain future writers in their craft. Because
Right.
in Mormon painting, we have a lot more going on now. Because if somebody has a deep experience with the painting, there's a way for them to like financially represent the depth of their experience. If
Mm.
somebody reads one of my books and has like a life-changing experience, typically I make like $2 to $4 off of that,
Yeah.
which I'm not complaining about, right? Like
No, no, it's just
I have
different.
a
Yeah.
job, so I'm
Hmm.
okay. Like I can do this as ministering. My only concern about that is it going to continue to happen? I feel behind as a
Hmm.
writer. I feel
Hmm.
like there is more need in our community. I was going to say demand, but it's need. Sometimes it's not a felt demand. People don't know what to ask for.
Yeah.
But there's this like deep need for the kind of work that a certain kind of writer is doing. And I feel like we've underserved people because we don't always know how to help somebody develop into a writer. So we don't have the range of voices available. And then we have a real distribution problem. We people have this need, but they know not where to find it, to borrow that Doctrine and
Yeah.
Covenants phrase.
Right.
And that's something I have maybe not done a good job at making
Uh-huh.
myself more findable, but
Uh-huh.
also we could do better as a community. I do feel like when I get invited onto a podcast, I did for 4 years a BYU TV show called Come Follow Up that's
Hmm.
about scripture. And I'd read not just my poems, but other people's poems there because I feel like they're useful and I
Yeah.
feel like it helps. And I've heard from a ton of people because that had a broader audience because there was the broader BYU
Yeah.
TV infrastructure.
Right.
Um, I've heard from a ton of people who go like, man, we're always excited when you come on. And I think the number one reason, I might be because I'm pretty, it's the eye candy, but
Yeah.
I think the
That's why
number
I
one
sign on.
reason is because they didn't know how much they needed that kind of literary approach
Hmm.
to faith.
Right.
And so, yes, there's an audience. There is work to be done in building the system
Hmm.
around the audience need.
Yeah.
And I hope we continue to do that.
Because you have the audience and you have the work, and it's a question of making the one accessible to the other.
Yes. Yep. And
Yeah.
I can feel guilt about the fact that I'm not like constantly, I'm not making my own YouTube channel and helping build stuff up. And maybe I can work on that, right?
Right.
But also, it's a huge relief when somebody else has done the work of building audience because that's their skill set.
Right.
They built the organization and that, and they can invite me to come and
Hmm.
become part of that conversation. We have a critical mass of people who are ready to participate. We
Right.
need more people to look and find those places and support those institutions so that these kind of things can happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing those experiences. I have some of those myself where it's kind of surprising, where you read it's like sometimes being an artist is this like you're just putting it out there. You're just putting
You
it
have
out there, and
no
the hope is
idea.
that someone is moved by it, someone is touched by it. And it can be weeks or months or years before I get, someone will come up to me and say, "Hey, I saw your show at such and such a time, or I read your play." And it can be worth it just for that one person, for that interaction to be like, I'm not just doing this for myself. And if there's a way to ensure that more folks have access and can and be aware of the fact that there are artists and writers like ourselves, that we are only two of many, that there is a lot of great work being made regularly, and that, when folks ask that question, it's like, well, is there Mormon literature? And we can wave our hands and say, yeah, look over here.
Yeah.
Um, and then
And I
that
think
goes both
maybe
ways. It's
that's the
like, is
thing
there an
for
audience for Mormon
people.
literature?
Yep.
Yeah.
Instead of going, is there Mormon literature? We are at a point now where you should assume yes. If
Yes.
you haven't found the book for you yet,
Keep looking.
let's keep looking and we'll try to help, right?
We'll try to help. And maybe it
And
doesn't exist and someone's going to write it,
yep. And you will have to wade through some books that aren't for you. And that's
which is
okay.
just the way books are anyway.
That's how books are. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of content in the world. There's more content now than there has been at any other point. And sometimes, yeah, you just have to search for the good stuff because that's what makes the good stuff the good stuff.
Yep.
Um, well, thanks for dealing with our, our poke the bear questions.
Yeah,
Folks,
there's
we're done being
101. All
grumpy.
the
We're gonna go
questions
on.
people want to ask, we've answered
Uh,
them. Little
we're gonna
grumpily,
switch
but we
gears a
did
little
it.
bit and try to be less grumpy. Which we can do because it's the afternoon and not 2 in the morning. But I think folks who may be less familiar with your work would like to get to know a little bit more about you as a
Yep.
guy because you're a real person. Here you are. And I think people want to know, like, where you're from and what your background is and what led you to Mormon literature.
Yeah. Uh, I remember when I was in college, people would ask, where are you from? And
Hmm.
I'd say I was at Otterbein College first, and that's where I'm from. So I'd be, oh, I'm here in town, Columbus, Ohio, right? And they'd be like, no, before that. I'd be like, oh, I was born in Utah, and they'd go, no, before that. And, and I'd be like, yes, thank you for asking this question. We lived before this life with our Father
Right.
and Mother in heaven. We
Oh, is
came
that where this is
here.
going? Oh
Uh,
dear.
so where am I from? The real answer is God. We are all from God originally.
All
No,
yes.
but I think with a little bit of time, the question people are asking is also the kind of family history question. So my dad's dad was Jewish. Um,
Hmm.
he spent most of his life in Los Angeles. His parents were from Romania,
Yeah.
and so got Romanian Jewish on that side. My mom's dad grew up Sikh in Punjab, in India. Well, in British India, it was undivided. Then half of it
Hmm.
went to Pakistan, half went to India when he was 12 years old. Um, I've actually got the book Latter-day Sikh that my wife and I co-wrote. This is my most recent book, is his story. It's
Yeah,
fascinating.
it's really exciting. Hmm.
And then both my grandmas were Mormon, came from Mormon families. Um, my dad's mom is from California. And part of the story that lots of people don't know, but is super important in the history of the church, which is the Mormon outmigration. In the
Hmm.
early 20th century, especially in the years after World War One, during and after World War One, a lot of people moved from Utah to California.
Yeah.
And that's where we kind of figure out what the church we know looks like, is when you're
Mm.
not doing it in a place where everybody's, or at least most people, are Latter-day Saints.
Right.
Um, so they're like out-migration Mormons, right? Although out-migration Mormons who also ended up with interesting connections. My great aunt was in Hawaii at Pearl Harbor and in Kuwait when it was invaded
Oh gosh.
in Desert Storm.
Yeah.
That family got connected to the Islamic world in different ways. I remember hanging out with the Shah of the nephew of the Shah of Iran.
Hmm.
He taught me some things about poetry when I was a kid because he was friends with my great grandma, right? And just like came
Right.
over to her house. And then my mom's mom, like I mentioned, was from her family was from the colonies in Mexico. She was born in El Paso, grew up in Hidalgo State in Mexico, and then back in West Texas. And that her grandpa was born on the Pioneer Trail.
Oh
The,
gosh.
the wagon stopped for an hour, and his
Yeah.
mom gave birth. Mary Wood gave birth to Helaman Pratt, and then they went on. And so he has like the Mormonist origin story. And
And the
then his
Mormonist
dad,
name, Helaman Pratt.
Helaman is yeah, that's a very Mormon name. And his dad was Parley P. Pratt, right?
Oh wow. Okay. So you're
So I've
related to
got
Parley P. Pratt.
I am a Parley P. Pratt descendant, yep, and have
Goodness.
the Sikh Jewish Mormon all come together. And then in
Mm.
my life, I was a BYU baby. My parents were both at BYU. I was baptized in California. I picked If You Could Hide to Kolob for the hymn. I'm still proud of that, that at
Yes.
8, I was ready for that kind of thing.
Mm.
And then I came of age mostly in Columbus, Ohio, and the Riverside ward there was like home. to me. I've got an essay called This Migrant World that talks a little bit about moving there. Uh, that word comes up in a poem called Song of the Salt Sea. That's like my long, super literary, complicated poem. That's kind of a T.S. Eliot, The Wasteland Mormon version, written
Hmm.
100 years after. It was the 100th anniversary. I was thinking about that. And now I live in American Fork, kind of by the DI. Fun fact, I
So
live in the
specific.
ward. Maybe unfun fact, I should have phrased this, but unfun fact. I live in the ward where Brenda and Erica Lafferty were murdered.
Oh goodness.
The
Yeah, that
story
is
that
not a fun
John
fact.
Krakauer used for Under
Mm,
the Banner of Heaven, and it's come up. And so, again, that's two, like I'm around some like there's hard stuff that happened here, but I
hmm.
know the people who were like there for the family afterwards and who knew, right? Like,
Yeah,
this is so I can see the more human side of stuff that's been super sensationalized.
yeah.
So yeah, that's where I'm from.
Okay. Great. And then and how did you get into Mormon literature? I mean, have you always been a writer? Because I feel like, I can say I've always been a reader, and I think I figured out I was going to be a writer sometime in elementary school, and I haven't really looked back. But have you always been a writer?
um Probably. I grew up in a very oral culture, so I was always a
Hmm.
storyteller and I
Yeah.
was always a listener. I like to
Hmm.
hear people tell their stories.
Yeah.
Um, and I was raised pretty playful. Yeah, I was thinking part of how I might have gotten into Mormon literature, I had a great primary chorister. Sister
Mm-hmm.
Bell, I was trying to remember her first name. I think it might be Karen Bell.
Okay.
Um,
That's an
but
appropriate
sister,
name for
right?
a chorister.
Um,
Kind of a perfect name.
yeah. And that was when I was a little kid. So we were in Utah Valley still. This was the Suncrest Third Ward in Orem. She like made up words to songs.
Mm.
So we would sing, there was the popcorn popping song, but we would also sing, I looked out the window and what did I see? Two Mormon missionaries coming after me, um, and stuff like that. And then just whole other, so I think, you know,
Ah,
from a young age, just randomly, I happened to be in this place where one woman gave me the like foundational experience of what does it mean to be a Latter-day Saint was you can play with this,
yeah.
right? And you can find language for experiences. And like
Hmm.
that's a way that we come together and grow. So I think that was helpful. Um, I definitely experimented some with writing when I was in high school. I liked theater a lot,
Hmm.
but I did more directing and stage management. I did a lot of like independent student run theater kind of stuff. I
Yeah.
liked the
That's what
scrappiness.
led to New Play Project. Yeah.
Um, so I do think my development as a Mormon writer was the development as a Mormon first and then
Yeah.
turning to language
Yeah.
to deal with that. My my mom has this very intuitive kind of faith. She'd talk a lot about like the divine spark in us and that kind of stuff. This
Hmm.
her own way of approaching faith. My dad, it was interesting because he could be really good at the like service sides of
Hmm.
faith and at thinking about faith, but then also kind of a prickly personality and
Yeah.
always be at odds with somebody and always also deconstructing and that kind of stuff. Um, when I was in my teens, he had he was very early in the internet powered faith crisis experience
Hmm.
where there's like a crisis of faith and also a crisis of trust in community. Um, and so he was upset with the church and different degrees of engagement at different times, and then like out over the
Yeah.
course of my like key developmental years. And then somebody where like just personality wise there's some volatility, so that was like definitely a thing I felt, right?
Hmm.
Like I was very aware of the supercharged feelings around faith and religious conflict. He was not happy that I was going on a mission and
Yeah.
that was like kind of intense. Um,
And that's kind of what led you to write your play
I
Prodigal Son.
yeah, at the time I was like, no, this has no influence. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
the, the character is not my dad of the
No, and
dad.
I
The
don't
character
think
of the
I'm
son
not
is not
saying
my
that it
son, right?
is, but I think those experiences are what lead the play
Yeah.
to exist. Yeah,
Well,
it's not at
and
all.
like you talked once about speculative autobiography. I like
Mm-hmm.
that term, that this
Yeah.
is, here's this dynamic
Yeah.
of difference. And Prodigal Son, for people who don't know the play, sort of is inverting the what we would think about the parable, because it's
Mm-hmm.
about a son who joins the church, who's grown up secular. His dad actually grew up in it. Like he's vaguely aware of the church from his grandparents, then
Yeah.
reintroduced through a girlfriend. And but the point was he's the prodigal from his father's point of view, right?
Right.
Which
But
was
we, as the
interesting.
audience, see his father as prodigal.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
To the audience, the father might be prodigal, but
Mm-hmm.
structurally, the son is the one, right? He's the son and
Yeah.
he's leaving. And I think the line there, like the end of the play is him saying, like, I accept, right?
Yeah.
Like he's my dad, and I'm content to be his prodigal son.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
my grandpa's not super into literature. He grew up on poetry. So like Urdu
Mm-hmm.
poetry he loves, but like
Yeah.
American literature he never got into, right?
Yeah.
But he uh, really, I think even before we produced the play, he just had seen the script, it was out, and happened to read it. And it was
Mm-hmm.
wild because he's like, man, this takes me back to
Yeah.
when he joined the church and was doing the thing that his family didn't expect.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Um, so, so yeah, definitely, I think being in that early experience where Latter-day Saint identity or Mormon identity has always been contested, but I
Mm-hmm.
felt that in this more like intimate way.
Mm-hmm.
And I was engaged with the like intellectual issues, with the interpersonal issues, with kind of all the layers, and thinking from a pretty young age about, man, why does this mean so much to me? I don't
Yeah.
have to stick with it. Like it, some ways my life would be easier if I didn't, right?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, what is it there? And I think that that thinking, maybe I would have become a writer anyway, but it certainly inflected the kind of writer I became. And
Sure.
maybe I would have done something completely different, right?
I
Uh,
wonder about that. Yeah.
but I was very interested in telling stories of my people. Okay, now though I'm thinking, I also maybe should have been right. In seventh grade, I wrote this short story where some of the characters were Punjabi and had like
Mm-hmm.
one of them had the same name as a great uncle of mine who I just loved. I thought he was the coolest, is Bachither. And my
Mm.
seventh grade English teacher was like, these names, nobody understands these names. Like, you got to change them. And I
Mm.
was so pissed off about that that I
Yeah.
probably was going to be a writer ever since then, just because
There's a passion.
there's a passion, there's this sense that like other people are not living the way I'm living, and
Mm-hmm.
a front, right? That
Yeah.
instead of saying, oh hey, I'm finding out about
Mm-hmm.
something I didn't know, there was a
Excuse me.
sense that like no, good writing conforms.
Mm-hmm.
And so being
Mm.
taught early that good writing conforms convinced me to do whatever I want.
Right, right, right. Well, I mean, the example you give about, about Punjabi names being difficult to someone growing up in the West. I mean, that's conforming to a very particular, to a very particular expectation that is assuming, that's what's correct. But really it's a little bit racist. So, you
Yep.
know, I mean, that's a good thing to sometimes you have to get angry about those things. And it is the passion and the fire that drives us to make things sometimes.
And I think for me, being at the intersection of minoritized racial experience, like I'm mixed
Mhm.
race, but I mean, my first day of college was 9/11. Like
Okay. Yeah.
I had
Wow.
some
Difficulties.
experiences and
Yeah.
opinions about what it means to be in the United States as somebody who is seen at times as not American and sometimes as like an active threat to the country,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
Um, but I think because I had that culturally minoritized experience, I was able to, I've been able with more clarity than some writers to see the way the religious, minoritized religious experience
Mm,
reflects the same patterns
hmm.
in academia. Sometimes, like in grad school, I was still getting notes about like you're writing weird cultural stuff from Jewish or Punjabi background that like
Yeah,
I don't get it, right? Like
right,
even in the the woke left, people are not necessarily, they don't have the skills to
right.
like think through things all the time. But
Yeah.
I also have had the experience of being able to recognize sometime, I'm being received religiously in a
Hmm.
way that has overlap with the way that like linguistically, right?
Hmm.
The syllables of this person I love, their name is perceived as a burden. In the same way in other spaces, somebody saying, no, this is how you should, if you're writing about religion, you have to engage with these things. And here's how we see religion. Why can't you write more how we see religion? I've felt like, no, I am willing to do the extra work to have a
Hmm.
religious conversation on my terms that
Hmm.
feel organic to the people I have known and
Hmm.
not just to this outside voice. So thank you
Yeah.
to my seventh grade teacher for giving me a bad grade and pissing me off. And I've had the chip on my shoulder ever since. And I think that's good. I
Yeah.
think a writer needs needs a reason.
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay,
I
how
think
else
we
did
need
I get
to,
into Mormon literature?
yeah,
Because we've been talking a while, but
we are talking about, yeah, that we have
I
to,
went on a mission. I loved
what?
that. It was in the former East Germany
Mm,
where people had been through some stuff. And
yeah.
that was a place too where the church had been through years where it was pretty actively persecuted by the communist
Hmm.
regime. That varied, right? There were some years where it was fairly tolerated. But that also, I think, helped me recognize there's power dynamics here, helped me think about how we organize societies in different
Hmm.
ways. I came back from my mission to Otterbein College in Ohio, where I was
Yeah.
studying theater. And Abhijat Joshi was teaching there. He's a Bollywood screenwriter
Oh,
who's
wow.
written some like hits and some
Hmm.
stuff that's, anyway, it was amazing that he was there.
Yeah.
This guy who wrote Three Idiots, for example, if people know Indian cinema at all. And he was writing it like at the time uh, that I was there. I asked if I could just come to his office and learn about Indian theater. And then
Hmm.
we started with theater, but then we do poetry and we
Hmm.
went beyond India. And he was like, here's stuff from Africa I think is interesting. But yeah,
Oh,
like
wow. That's
every week I
great.
was going to Abhijat's office. And that's
Yeah.
a lot of how I learned to become a Mormon writer because he was giving me these different tools
Yeah.
and doing stuff. I did school got more expensive while I was on my mission, and I hadn't planned for that, and I was running out
Yeah.
of money. And so um, my department offered to give me more money, and then the financial aid office was like, no, we don't want this guy, just he's a freeloader or whatever. And I remember thinking about the
No.
scripture about the Pharaoh, the Lord hardening Pharaoh's heart, right?
Yeah.
Being
Hmm.
like, okay, if I'm driven out, like I'm back at home. My dad's really upset about church. That's been a difficult thing. I was living at home after my mission. I'm at
Yeah.
this university where there's this fraught thing, like, and I had thought about like my advisor was like, go to Brandeis, right? He thought I'd do well there, but BYU's cheap. And
Yeah. I
so
was going to
even
say
though I
Brandeis is
had
going to be more
never wanted
expensive.
to go there for
Yeah.
facial hair reasons, I
Hmm.
went. I ended up going early to help my sister with something and getting a beard card because they were doing Old Testament seminary videos. So it's kind of funny. I'd
Yeah.
avoided it for facial hair reasons, and then I had a beard the whole time I was in undergrad there. Um, I went there. I emailed Eric Samuelson
Hmm.
before I went and was like, hey, can I come to your office hours or something? He's like, well, you're coming in the summer. Why don't you just come to my house? Which is
Oh,
awesome.
yeah.
So I got to go to Eric's house and talk to him. And then when I took his playwriting class, I'd bring just piles of my 10-minute play scripts and we'd mess with them. That's where I met Arisael Rivera, who he was
Yeah.
writing a play called Somos Sangre, which means we are blood. That's about like a Puerto Rican Mormon family. And I was doing
That's
this
great.
other Mormon stuff, and we started a new play project out of that.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, like doing a theater collective, I think that's how I like really developed a voice
Mhm.
is I'm I'm writing stuff that is immediately performed and people get to see it and I get to see them and kind of adjust and figure out what works by having live work up just
Mhm.
all the time.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about you can show folks your stack of books again. Let's talk about where
We
your
keep
work is.
moving them. We got
We
the
keep moving it around
couple of
because we've been reading
handfuls
from it.
now.
Yeah, it's great. Let's talk about where some of your work is available and where you've been published.
Yeah, okay. So for short work, what I would say is the main places are like Iriantum, that's the Association for Mormon Letters magazine. Wayfair magazine has been awesome. We've talked about that. I didn't say Mormon Liplets is kind of my new play project after what happened biographically is I was doing theater until I
I have
got
one of those
married
in it.
and wanted to be with my kids.
That's
and
Ariantum, and that's Mormon
and
Liplets.
that's Mormon Liplets.
The very first one.
Yeah, the first 5 years are in that anthology. So for 15 years, I've been running a contest where it's flash fiction, poetry, short essay. We've done some, you could do comics, you could do whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but Scott Hales, myself, and my wife, Nicole Wilkes Goldberg, started that together in 2012 as a
Woo.
way to kind of carry on that new play project mission of where
Hmm.
do we give people space and occasion to create work and find voice and
Yeah.
connect with audience.
Yeah.
So that's been really important to me as an editor, and that's a great place for an audience member to find stuff you like because it's just so quick. It's
Yeah.
like 1 to 5 minutes to read a thing and then
Mhm.
go check out the next one, right? And find
Right.
what resonates with you. I
And we've got
published
the books. The books are available, but also there are a lot of Mormon lit stories, the Blitz, I should say, that are available online. We'll drop a link in the description.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. So you can just online look through and find what's of interest to you.
Yeah.
I published a little in Sunstone and Dialogue. I've also published in the Liahona, right? Not
Right.
fiction, of course, but I've got the range. And then
Hmm.
in terms of books proper, my first novel was the 5 Books of Jesus.
Good
This
stuff. Good
thing
stuff.
still, every month it has been in publication, somebody has bought it, right?
Yeah.
It's still just like trucks along, and it's
Hmm.
been out for, I
A
don't know,
while,
I'm
at
thinking like
least
13
10, more
years.
than it's been a while.
Yeah.
Because I have it
So
somewhere. I have it somewhere. I want to say it's at least 10, maybe 12.
yeah, well, it's gotta be more than that because I wrote it. 2012 is the year.
2012.
So it turns
So
14
14 this, oh
this
wow.
fall.
Yeah.
Um, but that's a book where I queried to different agents and stuff to do the conventional publishing route. Nobody was interested, like at
Hmm.
all.
Yeah.
And at some point, I looked and I'm like, this is a literary Jesus novel. Like, people probably just don't know how they can sell it. I
Mm.
could look at broader Christian market, but I'm a Latter-day Saint, and how are they going to feel right now?
Yeah.
Honestly, that has changed. I think there's more room
Yeah.
in Christian publishers for Latter-day Saint work since then. And
Hmm.
then also, are they going to want me to talk about this a different way? And I could go to like like a Deseret Book type publisher, but are they going to want it a little
Yeah.
more Latter-day Saint, a little less Mormon, right? And I mean that there's not an overtly Mormon stuff, but I'd been a research assistant on Joseph Smith papers. I'd thought about how does a religion emerge. So to me, there's like very Mormon parts of this book, but it's just a Jesus retelling. Works
Yeah.
for broad audiences. Um, anyway, I was deciding what to do, where do I go in terms of trying to get this published. And as I was doing that, I read that like a successful literary novel sells
Mm.
2,000 copies. Like if you do 2,000 copies, that's great, right?
Yeah.
Because many literary novels sell 100 copies. Um, And like, I didn't know before that, that's, so like, here's all these steps. And like
Mm-hmm.
in the United States, there are going to be one or two book club books a year that sell just a ton because Oprah, Oprah has that infrastructure, right? She
Right.
built a market. So the book club book that hits will sell a ton of copies, but the like graph drops way off after that. And
Mm.
like more literary fiction, like people don't use that much. And I thought,
No.
you know what? If 2,000 copies is what you're going for, I got a lot of cousins. I got to start. Like, let me do
Yeah.
this. So I have published work on my own. A lot of it is listed now as Beankar core books. That's the name my great grandma gave to my mom as her like
Mm-hmm.
Punjabi name. And I just thought that
Mm-hmm.
was cute.
Yeah.
So that's what I've used as like a personal imprint. So several are through that. That said, so I work for church history. I've published stuff with the church. You
Mm-hmm.
and I both contributed to like the Saints volume. I'm a
Yeah.
co-author on Revelations in Context.
Yeah.
Global Histories that we talked about earlier with the Ivory
Mm-hmm.
Coast story has been important to me. Carry On is with Church Historians Press.
Yeah.
I've done a bunch of stuff with the church. Obviously, that reaches more people because there's an infrastructure. BCC Press published a couple of my books. Kelm, Tales of the Kelm First Word is with them. Burning Book is too. Maybe they're my Jewish publisher, I guess, uh,
Yeah.
for the Jewish Mormon stuff, coincidentally.
Coincidentally.
Um, and then I do have Latter-day Sick, we talked about, is with Deseret Book,
That's exciting. Yeah.
and has been a good fit for them. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's kind of what's the right thing for the project
Mm-hmm.
is the answer to where have I published?
All sorts of places.
All sorts of places. And what I would say to people who are interested in write, if you're a reader, find the publishers you like. If you're a
Mm-hmm.
writer, find the publishers you like. And
Yeah.
if nobody's doing quite the thing you want to do, like don't be afraid to go throw up a stage and do a show with some friends to learn, right?
Right.
And go do something. And you and I have talked about like there's a trade-off. You can't do that forever, right? At
Right.
some point in a career, you want to feel like you're connected to some infrastructure,
Right.
but you don't want to be beholden to it as you are figuring out who you are and what
Right.
you have to say to the world. And it's
Mm-hmm.
more important to find your soul, and then you can find your publisher.
Right. Right. And sometimes they may find you. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. That's great. Well, actually, that's a really good segue to we're gonna, I think, move our conversation to what do you want to do, James? I feel like, I mean, this whole situation with this award being for we talked at the very, very beginning about how you're supposedly, and I say this as someone who has also received this award, supposedly at the middle of your career, where you've been writing for 20 years, and the hope is that you're going to work and be creating more stuff for at least another 20 years. We hope more to come. But are there things that you want to do that you haven't done? What do you want to do, Brother Goldberg?
Well, one answer to this is there was a time in 2015. So when I first got my cancer recurrence diagnosis, it was in pancreas and liver. So they thought it was pancreatic cancer
Yikes. Yeah.
before they realized it was a weird testicular cancer recurrence. I had testicular cancer 2008.
Hmm.
Um, and so I'm coming out of amnesia for what they thought was a gallbladder. Well, it was a gallbladder surgery. They knew my gallbladder was bad. They took it out. They didn't know it was bad because a tumor had crushed it
Oh, gosh.
until they took it out.
Hmm.
And I'm out of anesthesia, and they tell me, "Hey, you've got this cancer in your pancreas to your liver. We think it's pancreatic cancer. We'll get it typed for you." But I already knew that the 5-year survival rate on pancreatic cancer is not good.
Right.
And and I remember I had always thought the hope of faith was that you live on. But in that moment when I'm like, oh, this like might be the end, I didn't look forward, I looked back. And
Mm.
the first thing I remember saying was like, I've lived a good life.
Yeah.
And it was nice to have the comfort of being like, no, I feel good about this.
Hmm.
And I think I've tried to hold on to some of that with my writing, the idea that, like, you know, 5 books of Jesus touched people. And I knew that by 2015 already. If that
Hmm.
was like all I got, that's a good run, you know?
Yeah.
Now, that said, never tell your wife I've lived a good life. Certainly not. Maybe I can. Maybe I'll earn that again, decades
Mhm.
from now. But like, not we. My youngest daughter had just been born,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
I'm allowed to break
so
your wife's heart, James. You are not.
yeah. So that was a time where I'm happy to be alive, right?
Yeah.
And so,
Hmm.
like, with the time I got, there's stuff I'd love to do, but I do think it's worth saying I'm in my bonus years
Mm.
already. And if I get a
Hmm.
lot of them, that's great. I've had an idea for a while for a series of novellas set in different decades of church history. August Wilson did this with plays about Black
Yes.
experience.
Yeah.
You've talked about the
Fabulous.
difficulty of theater space. Like, I'd love to do plays, but we don't have a globe. So I
Tell me
want
about it.
to do it.
Tell me about it, James.
Um, so I would love to write more plays, but not for this project. I'd like to write novellas about Mormon experience in different decades.
Hmm.
And I'd like to get that started before 2030. So at least
Mm.
the first one or two can come out at that 200-year mark.
Yeah.
That said, I'm kind of cheating now, and I'm working on a novel that is more inspired by the 250-year anniversary of the United States. And it's a speculative fiction work about a future where there's no more US, but people still get together in constitution halls and dream of democracy coming back.
Hmm.
That's kind of like, what if America was a religion? So that's Mormon inflected. There's like a jury that runs the little place, kind of like a ward council runs a ward. Um, but it's a potential crossover audience book. Um, what else do I want? I just want to write more. I want to be a good literary citizen, right? I want to be
Hmm.
publishing poems in these different outlets we have. I want to be sharing them in venues that are not about poetry or literature, but
Hmm.
but in a talk at church or whatever. I haven't published in Further Light yet. It's a new Latter-day Saints
Oh, science
speculative
fiction.
fiction magazine,
Hmm.
and I'd
Speculative
love to
fiction.
publish something there. Um, I do want to engage with audiences more and do
Hmm.
that, like, dumb influencer stuff that is intimidating to me and I put
Because you're
off.
so influential.
But I think it's a good way. I want to meet audience. I want to do better at meeting audiences where they are and
Yeah.
giving them opportunities to find the
Hmm.
distinct taste of this kind of aesthetic experience. Reading my own stuff, reading other people's stuff, right?
Hmm.
Telling them about it. I'd
Hmm.
love to do more of that and just get over myself to do it. And then I'd like to help build up the community, support the
Yeah.
institutions that are developing, help mentor people.
Well, I mean, that's actually one of the and we've talked about this a little bit, but I think this idea of community is so core to who we are as Latter-day Saints. And we, like this idea that we are very communal with each other, that church is in comparison to other liturgies that we have, the lay church, that we speak to each other on a very um eye to eye on a singular level. But this idea of community, and can we strengthen, and maybe this goes back to the idea of the audience and who the audience is, and meeting the audience where they are. It's like, how do we strengthen our literary community?
Yeah. You and I have had long talks about the struggles of meeting audience where they are,
Yeah.
and how I think part of the role of the Mormon writer is to just suck it up when the audiences are not always there, when they're sometimes
Yeah.
absent, and when they're
Hmm.
sometimes obnoxious. When they're
Yep.
taking issue with dumb stuff where it's like, okay, this isn't for you,
Hmm.
but like, that's fine. And you're not giving like a thought-provoking critique, you're just giving like reflexive feedback.
Yeah.
And you've certainly got that, I've got that, right?
Yeah.
And we just my philosophy is we just deal with that. But since we're celebrating me right now, let's tell the audience to step up. And here's what I think. Utah has gotten some national attention as a state that is very willing to pull books from school libraries and say what we don't want our kids to read or discover. And I think sometimes in our community, we've been big on the don'ts. Don't do this and that. And I think it would be great if we put at least as much energy into the do's.
Yeah.
If we were to say, instead of let's mobilize to pull stuff out of libraries, what do we want in the libraries? Can we challenge school libraries to have some stuff that represents religious cultures? Right? Yes, they're secular, and yes, there's separation of church and state, but in a school library, we're not forcing kids to read this stuff. It's not curriculum. The library is actually where religion kind of belongs, right?
Right.
And especially humanized religion, the kind that
The
exists
library
in
rather than the
literature,
classroom.
like lobby, call people, get those books in, right? And get stuff in your life. Focus more on what do you want to read? What do you want to see? What do you want to champion? I think if the audience would change mindset a little bit to building up instead of shutting out, we would be in a much better position as a community. And, you know, we do have an economy where we've gotten a little passive about stuff, right? And a lot of times audiences just kind of wait to respond to what somebody gave you. We're going to have better art if you go look and choose than if you wait for the algorithm or the advertiser to come bombard you with something. So step up, get over that human thing where we bond more quickly over shared contempt than over shared aspiration. And like, let's build relationships about our aspiration, and let's build a community there. So readers, find what you like, read it, champion it, support it in every way, right? If you can do financially, great. If you can't do financially, that's fine. Conversation, talking about it, we have ways to do that, do it.
Yep.
I think we need to build up venues too. I've been excited to see some venues that are not exclusively literary open up. I was invited, for example, to give a Wonder of Scripture lecture by the Maxwell Institute. I think they really liked it because a literary sensibility is important to the like devotional work of community and as an intellectual tool, as a way to engage with our tradition and scripture. So the more we can have those institutions broadening their understanding and including literary people, the better. And not just like one token people. Like my dare for them would be like, who's next, right? Who's the next writer? I've loved events like the Wayfair Summer Festival and Restore from Faith Matters.
Yeah, we should drop those links in.
Center for Latter-day Saint Art events when they had their festivals. I like podcasts. Those are another opportunity where we can build up. Book clubs are something
I'd
worth
love to have a good book club. Let's do that.
I think every time I've been invited to a book club, I've come, even if it's, hey, I have another conflict that night, but can I walk out for 15 minutes and call and say hi?
Yeah.
Right? So I love when people reach out and do that. One other thing I would say about this question of how do we build audience is it is helpful when we have people where this is their job instead of you and I where we're always trying to scrape out room on the side between work and community and other responsibilities, right? It would be great if like BYU could hire some people, like if they could have somebody who's doing Mormon literary criticism from English department. They do teach classes, but that's not like the main responsibility of the people who teach that. That's not their primary field.
Right.
And I think it'd be great if they had a spiritual and religious writing class, right? And committed to also having someone on creative writing side be a practitioner. And the problem with that is not every book is for everybody. And sometimes in the past, there have been writers creating stuff that like different figures in the church didn't like, sometimes for really good reasons. But we need to learn as a community to like sift through and say,
Yeah.
okay, that didn't work. That wasn't a good match. They can find another place.
Yeah.
And we're going to find who's the person who's a little more aligned with vision. And we can find a golden space to give them some room to explore without feeling like everything has to be the one ideal,
Well,
but
yeah, it should
also
be great if things are not all, we don't want everything to align all of the time.
no, no, we
Yeah.
don't. I mean,
No.
in some cases you do. We have things where
Some
we have a
cases, yeah.
process to like correlate and approve when this is the voice of the church. But a person could be a creative writing professor at a church school without coming across as the voice of the church, right?
Right. Right. No, we
And
have to be able to differentiate those things.
yep. And so I think there's a lot of possibilities, whether it's at independent institutions like Faith Matters,
Hmm.
or whether it's at a place like BYU that's semi-church, to say, yeah, sometimes we're not going to love everything, but can
Hmm.
we find the people who are, we feel like on balance, they are serving the community and the culture and the
Hmm.
vision we have, and we're going to invest in that. Because
Right.
in other fields we have, and
Right.
we've invested even when sometimes it didn't work. We've come back, we've tried again. And we need that like pioneer persistence,
Pioneer
not just at the
persistence. Yeah.
level, at the level of individual writers, we've shown that we've got it. And
Hmm.
we have, like, I did not, nobody asked me to do all this
Yes.
3 piles of books, right?
Yeah.
Nobody asked me, but they needed it. And I was
Yeah.
willing to go and do that. And when institutions get that persistent,
Yeah.
right? When they carry the way we do, that's when we'll have real renaissance.
Amen. That's great. Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like that's how we strengthen the community. That's how the community survives.
Yep. And that's something we don't wait for the institutions to do that, right?
Hmm.
We step
Yeah.
up, readers step up. If you can make a book club and that's the thing you can do, do it and call me.
Yeah. And if the
But
readers are asking for it, then I think that also helps the institutions. That has a
yes,
little more push with the institutions than the writer saying, hey, publish my stuff. Hey, produce my stuff. But if the readers are going, why can't I get this?
yes. If there's a
Yeah.
time when book clubs around the church are reading this stuff and talking about this stuff and that's visible
Hmm.
and transparent,
Yeah.
then we're going to say, how do we mark all these conversations?
Yeah.
And I think we'll get to a point where a lot of leaders want this stuff because they grew up with it and it
Right.
means something to them,
Yeah.
right? If
Uh-huh.
people who were shaped by literature in their language,
Right.
come up later, they'll know how to invest. But it's been a thinner tradition. We're a growing faith. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, we have 200 years of history, but 200 years ago is not a lot of people,
No.
right? The
No.
weight
Yeah.
of the community is toward the present. But
Hmm.
I am optimistic about the future. Sometimes I think we like shuffle and drag. We let God drag us into the future
Yeah.
instead of putting our shoulder to the wheel. And that's what
Hmm.
I want people to start to do.
Well, I've got one last question for you.
Okay.
So, what's your advice for a developing Mormon writer, for someone who's just getting started, who's someone who strangely thinks what you and I do is fun and exciting and something they should pursue? What's your advice to them?
Well, I guess it's exciting. It's not always fun, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think the first part is like the story of Gideon in the Bible. Like,
Hmm.
you can opt out. You don't have to do this. You can be somebody who's a writer and a Mormon and compartmentalize a little or let it complicate. Or you could do something else, like have a real
Yeah.
stable job, and like that's great. You probably should do this on the side of a stable job, but like some people, the way you and I did, they're going to feel it. They're going to
Hmm.
see the need, and like this is their calling.
Yeah.
And I have 3 pieces of advice for those. One, be brave.
Okay.
I want you to recognize the forces that are against you or that would push you in different directions that are not conducive to what people need,
Hmm.
and just refuse to bow to them,
Yeah.
right? Be brave enough to find your voice and relate to the world in your way. And it takes bravery. It takes bravery within a publishing industry, within publication communities, right? Just because they exist doesn't mean they're pushing you the right way. Be
Right.
brave, chart your course.
Yeah.
Number 2, be kind.
Mm.
I
Hmm.
think you have to love your people and serve your people if you're going to produce the kind of art that will stand the test of time. You can't, like, there's a role of art to critique, but I think the most meaningful critiques are the critiques that come from a place of love and from a
Yeah.
place of belonging and shared investment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of saying you people need to fix this, what do we do, right?
Right.
um, if you can bear with your people in their infirmities, like
Hmm.
the scriptures say, and both critique and nurture,
Yeah.
that's what we need. So be brave, be
Be
kind,
kind. Yeah.
and be relentless.
Ah, yes, yes, yes.
Right. Get
That's just good
frustrated,
advice. That's just good advice
vent,
for a writer. Yeah.
right? Like you and I have vented, and you can vent, throw yourself a pity party, and then write. There's a couplet from an Urdu language poet that I love, Fez Ahmed Fez, where he says, "Your feet bleed, Fez. Surely something will bloom as you water the desert simply by walking through it."
Mm,
And
mm,
I think about that, right? There are
yeah.
going to be times when, from responses from in the community, you feel wounded, you are wounded. From responses outside the community, you feel wounded, you are wounded. From doing that work of not looking away, you feel wounded, you are wounded.
Hmm.
And that's part of the job, right?
Yeah.
To to walk on through the desert, watering things, even if you're watering with your blood, right? And it's kind
Mm.
of an emo image. I'm kind of an emo guy, right? Like that's um,
Yeah.
but I think that's what you need to do. If you come in with eyes open and you're
Hmm.
not looking for the kind of greatness that's affirmation adjacent
Yeah.
that we sometimes do, but looking to contribute, and you're willing to be brave, be kind, and be relentless,
Yeah.
the reward is you get to be part of an intergenerational conversation
Hmm.
about what it means to live with this faith and how we see the world differently from this point of view. And that's a
Hmm.
gift to you, that's a gift to the people who share this with you, and that's a gift
Yeah.
to the diversity and the culture of the world, and one
Hmm.
they don't know right now all the time that they need. But if we're prepared to give, I think the time will come when we care
Hmm.
who gave voice to the community in this period, who said that thing that other people said, you put into words the thing I
Yeah.
was feeling my way towards. And there will be space in heaven and on earth for that.
Yeah. I really, that's a beautiful thought. That couplet that hit me hard because it's that idea of watering the desert. Because what happens if you don't? If you don't take those steps? I mean, the watering, the idea, and also that the desert itself is just arid to begin with. But if you don't take those steps and you don't water, what is lost?
Yep. And
No
that
pressure.
happens all the time, right?
Happens all the time. Yeah.
Happens all the time. And I don't blame you if you're tired and you need a break, or
Because it's hard. It's
if you
hard.
decide you don't want to do it as
Yeah.
the writer, but as a reader and contribute in your little ways.
Hmm.
But Mel, I'm glad you've done the walk,
Yeah. I'm
right?
glad
And I'm
you've done the
glad
walk.
it's nice we have moments like this conversation where we can meet together and say, it's been 20 years walking in the wilderness,
Hmm.
but we know things and we've
Yeah.
experienced things because we were willing to go on this journey. And you know what? We have contributed.
Yes.
And this is where we renew our resolve to continue to be
That we're going to
brave,
keep
kind, and
going.
relentless, and walk our way towards the next
Yeah.
intersection. And I'll see you
Yeah. The
there.
next time that I'm going to see you at the slab and be like, is that the guy I'm supposed to talk to? Is this where, am I really in the right place? Okay. But now I know you, and I'm glad I can say I'm in the right place. And I feel like, yeah, we've both contributed and we've got more to share. I know James you're so prolific and there's so much that you have to offer and I've already given. And it's exciting to think, I mean, I'm really glad that you're getting this award. Congratulations. I think it's well deserved. I think you have a considerable body of work. And for those who are watching this, I know a lot of folks who are watching this video are going to already be familiar with James, but I think it's also going to be really great if we can introduce some new folks to your work and bring some new eyeballs to your poetry and to your fiction and hopefully to your plays. Even though it's been what, 13 years, 14 years.
I did
Um,
one more a couple years ago, a short one.
that's great. That's good. See. But yeah, let's get some new eyeballs on James's work, and we know he's going to continue to produce some really great and profound and thought-provoking stuff. So yeah, yay for a party to celebrate James. And yeah, we're looking forward to more. I'm looking forward to more stuff, James. Bring it on, bring it on. Give me some more stuff.
Well, thanks to everybody home listening, and let's keep it up and do it again.
Yeah,
Take
let's do it
care.
again soon. Thanks, James.